There you go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Comic Arts Workshop. My name is Ramon Gill. I am the host and organizer. We've been doing this since 2017. We used to do it in person, and now we're doing it online because of the pandemic, but now we're just doing things online. Though the next event's going to be live in person, actually, but people are asking if we can do it virtually as well. So we will have to host a separate networking event that's virtual. And we have done virtual events before, networking events before, but it's been a while. Is there anything else I need to announce? I guess I'll make some announcements at the end. But tonight we have our special guest, Janet Lee. And Janet came to us because I posted an online a topic online about self-publishing or not, or regular publishing, which I'm sort of like having to decide, though I kind of decided already. And then Janet was very informative in her comments. I thought, why not ask her to come in and be a guest, because I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear what she has to say, having done both self-publishing and regular publishing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Janet Lee. And Janet, would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am the weirdo who worked in book publishing for a couple of decades before I went to start illustrating books. My first book came out in 2009. It was called Return of the Dapper Men, and it won an Eisner, which kind of launched me into doing comics full time. Since then, I've worked on a bunch of different books for a bunch of publishers, and am currently writing middle grade graphic novels. The first one that I'm writing myself as well as illustrating is coming out in 2025 from one of the New York publishers. So I've sort of drifted that direction at this point. But before that, I was a buyer for one of the biggest, if not the biggest, book wholesale companies in the US. I worked a little bit in a print-on-demand printer. I worked in international sales for books. So I did a whole bunch of stuff beforehand. And so I've got a weird perspective, but that's me.
I know I sent you a bunch of questions, but I do have some follow-up questions based on your answers. So if you don't mind.
No, sure. And apologies for drinking things. It's allergy season in Tennessee. So I'm, yeah, good. Excellent.
I'd like to ask you, did the Eisners really change everything?
And they did. I immediately got offered a series at Marvel. It was a limited series, and I did 2 of them back to back, and that was, I feel like maybe monthly comics are sort of a young person's game in some way. That's when you opt to, I didn't know any better, and I opted to pencil, ink, color, and do the covers for, yeah. And the second one, I cut back to just penciling and inking, but it was still a lot. I loved working on it. It was Jane Austen adaptations, my degree is English. So I loved doing it. I would do it again, but I prefer graphic novels where I can kind of pick what my schedule is and then, plot it out and not have to do 20-30 pages a month necessarily.
So the Jane Austen adaptations, you weren't writing, you doing the script, right?
I wasn't doing the script. I was strictly illustrating. Return of the Dapper Men was a little different because Jim and I sort of collaborated on all aspects, but the Jane Austen adaptations for Marvel were my first time using just a straight full script with.
And they were, and that was a monthly thing? You had
It was a monthly thing, and then they were collected into anthology, or whatever they're called, the collected.
They should just let you do the whole book.
Yeah, I basically did the whole book in 5 issues, and then they collected it and sold them. So I did the last 2 of those that they did.
Got it. And it was your choice not to go to do more of those.
Well, again, being new to this whole thing, I did not fully So we ended up deciding the final book to do was Northanger Abbey. And as a buyer, I can tell you that Northanger Abbey sells in the book market roughly like a ninth of what Pride and Prejudice does. So because Marvel and DC rightfully are looking at sales numbers before proceeding with things, if I had really fully understood stuff, I probably would have pushed for doing Persuasion next, because it would have gotten higher numbers. There's just, there was never going to be the sales market for Northanger Abbey that there was for Emma or Pride and Prejudice. It just wasn't there.
Got it. You said you would want to go back, or would you?
Oh, I would absolutely. I mean, I ended up doing spot illustrations for a kickstarted Pride and Prejudice that they did, that another company did. So I would absolutely do it. And I would, I've done covers for Marvel since then. I would go back and do a limited series or do something. I just, I know my limitations, and I like to pencil, ink, and color. So it's tough on a it's tough on a monthly schedule. So it would be limited for me.
I've met a lot of creators who will get a project from Marvel or DC, and then they won't get a project again for a long time.
I did anthologies for them. Yeah, I mean, I think I have a more indie style, so I don't fit into the broad array of projects that they've got. I also haven't really actively pursued a lot of it. I love the characters, but my heart is sort of in indie stuff and coming up with my own stories. So while it's fun to do, I guess in the back of my head, I've always felt like, Wolverine,
it is work for hire.
They deserve somebody that really loves doing that 100% of the time, that they're into it. It's their joy. That's what they've always wanted to do. And I feel like they deserve that amount of love. I feel like you can tell if the person is, if this is their favorite thing ever versus something they enjoy, but it's not their dream to do. And I probably now shot myself in the foot and they'll never hire me for anything again. But I love you guys. It's not my favorite.
Those adaptations seem to me like they were for a YA market.
Probably YA. Well, and that's YA is a very specific thing in book publishing. It's basically adult books, light. So they can have cussing, they can have sex, they can have things like that. I would say it's probably more middle school market.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it is for older people, even for adults. But I mean, it's hard to tell with adaptations. It tends to be for the market of the adult book, and the adult book is technically an adult book.
An adult book 50 years ago might be a middle grade book today. So.
Absolutely. And I think we've all had experiences where we, sweet talked a librarian or somebody into giving us a book that we were probably too young for, but we went ahead and read it anyway. Mine was stuff like the Anne McCaffrey Dragon Rider books. Those were not for children. I don't know how I talked someone into it.
I have no experience with librarians stopping me from borrowing.
No, they've never stopped. They have stopped me from stuff occasionally, but especially going to a religious school growing up. But I managed to sweet talk some librarians into giving me stuff.
I mentioned the YA part because are most of your own creator-owned books middle grade or YA or what?
They are. I've focused it on that, and a part of this is me looking too long in the abyss, but for the longest time, it's now shifting a little bit, but at least in the book industry, the middle grade market is the highest paying market, the one that sells the most books. So I enjoy them, and it's a little strategic on my part as well, because I know.
Well, I'm pretty much doing the same thing. I've shifted from regular mainstream type stories to middle grade books.
Yeah.
So when you did was it Dapper What was the name of the book?
Return of the Dapper Man. It was my
Dapper
first
Man.
book. Yeah.
That was self-published?
No, it was picked up by Archaea at the time before Boom, Archaea before Boom. Uh Stephen Christie, Jim McCann, who wrote the book, was working for Marvel at the time. He was in their marketing department, and he knew Stephen Christie from his time as an intern at Marvel. Everybody, I think, has interned at Marvel or DC at some point in their career. And when Jim mentioned that he was writing the book, Stephen asked to hear about it, and Jim pitched it at San Diego Comic-Con, and they picked it up for us, which was cool because I had never done sequential art and had no I had no pages for them to see at all, but they picked it up anyways. It is the weird one that was all done in decoupage, so it was all like layers of drawings that I cut out and glued down onto boards mostly, and then scanned in for the pages. So
Okay, so you did The Return of the Dapper Man, which
Yeah.
was picked up by Archaea,
yeah,
and then you won the Eisner, and then you got you did some work for Marvel and DC.
Yeah. and then I did an adult image comic with Jim called Lost Vegas, Casino Heist in Outer Space. And then I did the kickstarted, self-published. It was I was hired by a group that were doing their own thing to spot illustrate Return of the Dapper Man. I'm sorry, no, spot illustrate Pride and Prejudice. Then I did some anthology work, and I worked on a couple of projects that got pulled. Like during pandemic, I was supposed to do a Dark Horse book that didn't make it. So there's been some stuff like that. And then I transitioned into doing work for mainstream publishing in the book industry. So my last two were from Viking, which is Random House, and my next one is from Roaring Brook, which is Macmillan.
Which of these projects was self-published?
None of them. I think that's where we had some confusion. I have not self-published, but I did work in print on demand, where I was constantly working with self-publishers for.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so I have seen it from both sides. I just, maybe because I knew exactly what was involved for the self-publishers, again, this about me, if you know anything now, it was not for me. It was a lot of, basically, to become a self-publisher, you need to be ready to be a publisher because you are taking on all the business aspects of it. I do not want to do all the business aspects of it, and I'm willing to give up a certain amount of profitability and autonomy in order to pay somebody else to do that for me. So I have so far made the decision not to, although I don't know. I've got a couple of stories in my head that I'm not sure I'm going to find a publisher for, and I may decide to do it on down the road. It's just, haven't yet.
I think it makes perfect sense that when you are self-publishing, you're sort of doing everything.
Yeah.
You're doing the marketing, you're doing the production. Maybe you can hire
You're doing
somebody to do the
billing, you're
production.
doing shipping, you're doing
Shipping, right? Or you can pay for people to do that.
Yes, you
Right.
can. Yes, you can.
But what you've seen when you were doing print on demand, what were I should just move your screen to the middle of my screen so I'm looking straight forward.
Looking
There you
straight
go.
ahead. Yeah.
So what would you say from what you saw of self-publishers? What was their I guess income like and compared to and granted there were some people who were probably more successful and some people who were less successful.
Sure.
I guess if you could give us some case studies or anecdotal stories of what people were able to accomplish self-publishing using print on demand.
Sure. I mean, and it's sort of from what I saw, the most profitable things to self-publish are nonfiction, honestly. The guys who made a steady living at it were maybe reprinting portions of difficult to find out of print books, or
Talking about prose.
Yeah, it was mostly prose, and prose is the least expensive one. I think one of the biggest challenges when you are um going with print on demand for a comic is the cost of printing it. If you're just doing a black and white comic, it's one thing. If you decide to get into color, then suddenly your per unit cost for the book becomes
Goes
a
up,
whole
right?
lot more expensive, and it can price you out of the market really quickly, unfortunately. So I would say that's a challenge that people have to deal with.
Did you see anybody who were doing graphic novels and managed to figure things out so that they were doing pretty well?
Um, I think the people that self-publish graphic novels that do really well tend to have a maybe a broad approach to things. So what they might do is set up with a print-on-demand company. And again, my experience is mostly with, it was called Lightning Press at the time. Now it's Ingram Spark. So it was they have the advantage of being connected to Ingram's wholesale system. So you can just make the book available through Amazon and companies like that, and let people order one at a time and have it be printed as need be. Someone can just order it that way. But by and large, if you're going to be successful and selling your book through stores, or hitting a price point that feels like it's the same as other books that people can buy locally, you're going to probably go to offset printing and then have a warehouse full of books somewhere that you're shipping out. So you kind of need to have, so I mean it's the price point, I think, that's the major hiccup to really selling through print on demand super well. And again, part of that comes from the fact that if you're going to sell to a bookstore, they expect a 50% discount off of things. I mean, and you can't, if you're paying $10 to print your book and the standard pricing for it is about $16, you're not making any money off of that. You're losing money on every sale.
Here's another sort of like side question. Just for
Sure.
everybody, could you please explain to everybody here what print on demand is, and especially what Ingram Spark does?
Sure, apologies. So print on demand is a system using digital presses whereby the company can create one-off books. They will have your book file on hand. You will have proofed it, and they will print within a set format. You may have a choice of like 5x7 trim size, 6x9 trim size, 11x17, 11, 8.5 by 11,
8.5 by
sorry,
11.
trim size, brain death. But you can't do variants. You may have a choice of doing a hardcover with insert, but you've basically limited your choices. There will be very specific requirements for the files, but once you have those loaded in, this company can either print copies of your book digitally, 1 to 25 to 1,000 if you want to, and can do the same thing. What Ingram Spark does specifically is they link up through book purchasing systems. They, as the major wholesaler in the US, Ingram is selling to pretty much everybody. Unlike the comics market, the book market tends to have a number of wholesalers, but Ingram has sort of come out as top of the heap. So pretty much everybody will buy directly from the publisher and will buy from like Ingram as a backup or a first shop. So if they make it available through their database, then somebody like Amazon, somebody like Barnes and Noble have it on their online sales, even if they don't stock copies on hand. So I, as a consumer, can log on to Amazon and say, oh, Raymond's new comic is for sale. I can buy it and they will ship it to me within, X number of days. So, and then as a publisher, you would just receive an ancillary payment for it. It's kind of like if you put any merchandise up on like a Redbubble or, you know, Society6, something like that, and you just get a percentage of sale.
What are the pros and cons of doing it this way? Compared to say, I guess either going with a publisher
Mhm.
or even just doing an offset print run.
Right. Yeah. And there are pros and cons. You do want to consider them. The pros to doing it print on demand. Well, let's say the pros of doing it print on demand versus self-publishing. And I would recommend to, there's nothing to say that you have to only print through print on demand. You may have a number of books that you're going to sell directly that you printed offset for the lower cost per unit and still have it listed through print on demand if you want to. You don't have to just choose one. But if you've decided to self-publish or you're looking into it, I would say the pros are, I mean, autonomy is a big one, right? So you get to, nobody's going to tell you that this story doesn't work. A lot of times when you're selling to a publisher, you're selling to their sales and marketing team. So they're going to have input into whether they think they can sell the book. And, you know, they tend to sell things that they know are going to sell. If you've got something that's very different, you know, maybe it's a horror, maybe it's like a Pan's Labyrinth where it's a horror story about a little kid, but it's to an adult market. That's kind of hard to sell to a publisher because who's the audience for this? Technically, they're going to think it's a kid's book, but it's not a kid's book. So there's a lot to be said for autonomy.
Lead time too.
I'm sorry.
Lead time.
Lead time, absolutely. You can take as long as you want to. There's no contract, there's no deadline. You can do it as fast or as slow. You also can probably try some different interesting formatting things if you want to. No one's going to tell you not to. You're completely at your own devices. You additionally get if you set it up through something like Amazon through Ingram Spark, then you're never going to have to ship it out. You can just sort of take ancillary payments for things. It just sort of sells itself. Although I would recommend doing marketing because there's a lot of books out there, but you don't have to. You can just sort of you can buy it here and put a link, and you never have to deal with shipping or accounting or any of that. It's all going to be taken care of. You also, you know, you're going to get a higher amount per book. On the negative side, that's usually offset by reach. Working with a publisher, one of the things they're supposed to bring to the table is reach, where they can get you into bookstores, they can get you into wholesalers, they can maybe ship overseas. And you're kind of paying for that. You're going to get less per book, generally speaking. And, you know, depending on your personality, if you've got a big reach yourself and you've got a lot of places that you're selling things, there's a lot to be said for being able to just print up 25 copies of the book as you need it and, you know, take it with you to the show that you're going to or whatever, selling it directly through your big cartel site, whatever. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. The pros of going with a traditional publisher, reach and being able to focus just on the writing, illustrating aspect of it. You are, depending on the publisher you pick, you're going to have more or less input from an editor. That can be good or bad, depending on your editor. And you're going to have less control over when it's going to come out. You know, maybe I want my book to come out for Christmas of 2024, but it's not going to be done. They need it to come out on their schedule for 2025. They're also going to maybe move you around a little bit depending on what else is coming out on their book list, which can be frustrating. They want to spread things out a little bit. You'll never have that problem if you're self-publishing. But yeah, I think a lot of people I think it really depends on the personality. There are a lot of people that love running the business of publishing, and they love the autonomy of being able to do it. And there are a lot of people that don't. And if you don't, you probably want to seek out a publisher, because you really have to get into that if you're not.
What about what's your experience been with publishers helping you market your work?
Publishers don't market as much as we would love for them to. Sometimes they do. I mean, they are they're going to present your book to buyers across the country. They are going to submit your book for various awards, which is, again, something you would have to do as publisher if you're self-publishing. And they are going to promote it to an extent, but in my experience, you're still out there beating the drum for your own work. You're still out there. I have a list of bookstores. I call them up and talk to them about carrying the book, ask them about doing signings if I want to do a signing run. I've never had somebody set up signings for me. I will make giveaways and doodads to go with books. Sometimes I make a point of going to the American Library Association summer convention, which we should talk about because it's a great outlet that people don't take advantage of, so that I can sell directly to libraries, because as far as I'm concerned, libraries are the greatest hand sellers in the entire world. They will tell everybody how great your book is and put it into the hands of kids and adults that might like it, that have not found it yet. So I try to do a bunch of that as much as possible. I'll send out mailers. I will do a podcast tour. I will do, I'm already, the character in my book has a disability. I've already been talking to a library in Brooklyn. It's doing some sort of special thing on books about kids with disabilities. So, you go ahead and you take your stuff where you can and market it. So you are going to be marketing either way. You get a little more support from a publisher, in that the bookstore knows that they can get the book reliably for sure. I think that's one limitation to self-publishing. People don't always trust that you'll ship the book when you say you're going to, or that it's going to arrive undamaged. There's just a trust factor with a known entity. But you will still have to market, and you should. I mean, honestly, I'm considering hiring a publicist to promote the next book, just because there's a lot of noise.
Does that trust on the books, the access to the books, does that get alleviated a little bit by working with a company like Ingram Spark?
Yes, they know that Ingram will ship it on time, and they're already paying Ingram, so they're not cutting a different bill. I mean, that's one issue with self-publishing or any small publisher. It costs money to cut invoices if you're a bookstore, so they try a lot of times to limit their purchases from small publishers to something like a wholesale or distributor environment, just because you can get a bunch of them in one place and you're not cutting like tiny checks or tiny invoices to people across the board that you can lose track of. They're short-staffed just like everyone else is. So
you keep mentioning things that makes me want to divert into.
Oh, no worries. And I'm sorry. This is my problem. I've got like this whole other life.
So you mentioned the ALA. I would love to hear your strategy or your philosophy behind working with the ALA.
They are amazing. So the first thing you need to know is the American Library Association has 2 different conventions a year. What you want to look at is the summer convention. You don't want to go unless you have a book that, this is where libraries will only carry books that have spines that are big enough to put, the little tracking thing and what number it is. You have to have a full spine. It can't be like a comic book where it's a staple spine.
It can't be a saddle stitch book.
It can't be a saddle stitch book. It has to have a binding with a spine. As long as you have that, you can go to ALA. The summer convention has got a specific area called think they call it like artists. They have just for graphic novelists. They love graphic novelists so much that they give us our own artist alley. It costs nothing to attend. It costs nothing for the table. You do have to pay for your hotel and getting there. But you do donate, could be books, could be posters, prints, could be a piece of art to their auction.
Wait a minute, you get an artist table for free?
For free.
Oh my God. I just paid for an exhibitor's table.
Well, I just paid for one for New York too. So it's expensive. But ALA is doing this because they have so embraced graphic novels. They've got like an entire team. They've got a graphic novel roundtable that evaluates. It's specifically there to promote graphic novels and different comics. I have another tip for you when we're done with this to do with libraries, but yeah, it's a free table. The show itself moves around. So this year it was in Chicago. The year before that, it was in Washington, D.C. It's been in San Francisco before. It's been in, it goes to Chicago a lot. It's been in New York. So you'll need to go on the website to see
Next
where
year.
it is,
San
where it's
Diego.
close to, and they'll take things for next year. But once you get there, I didn't think it was gonna be profitable for me, because there are publishers, literally they're giving books away to the librarians so that they can read it and decide to stock. Everyone who's going there is buying for a library or library system. So you're not selling just one book to them. You might be talking to the buyer for the Chicago library system, and they may want several hundred books. So for all the different libraries within that area. So everyone you're talking to is buying a lot of books. But they are probably going to make buys for the library through the library system, but they will buy individual books from you directly. They buy prints. If you got prints that are okay to hang up in a library, they'll buy prints. So you can make your table and cost, I mean, the table cost is non-existent, but you can make your hotel and flight back by selling things at your table, and you're promoting your books to librarians that are going to stock library systems. So very valuable. My other sidebar point of advice is back to Ingram. They have a group called the Collection Development Department that services libraries. If you send the graphic novel collection development librarian at Ingram a digital PDF, a printed copy of your graphic novel, they will review it for all the libraries that buy from them, and they will make sure that the metadata in the system is correct for your book. So
That's a great piece
yeah,
of
it's a
advice.
huge thing. It's very hard to get your metadata right. Have a librarian that does this for a living. Do it for you for the cost of sending them a book. I mean, it's the best way. If you have a publisher, they should be doing that for you. If you're doing it yourself, they still want to hear from you, as long as your book has a spine. They want
I
to
actually went to Chicago, like I mentioned, and I
Ooh.
was promoting my book, but
Mhm.
I was giving it away.
You don't have to. You can sell it.
Well, I
can
just wanted to make sure it was in their hands. So.
Right. Well, and that's fair. I give a lot of them away too. But you know, but you could also sell prints if you wanted to give the books away too. There's things you can do. So.
Okay. My next I guess I guess off the cuff question.
Yeah.
You mentioned podcasts.
Yes.
Now, I guess where do you find these podcasts? Because what I notice among comic book people is the podcast audience for the podcast that comic book people do are other comic book people.
Yeah.
Right. So are you reaching out to readers as opposed to creators when you go onto a podcast?
It depends. I think it depends on the podcast, and I have a tendency to go a little sideways with this. Example, my last two books were reimaginings of Frank Baum's non-Wizard of Oz books. Wrote them with Amy Chu wrote, I illustrated, but because Frank Baum is with the Wizard of Oz, I ended up going on the Down the Yellow Brick Road podcast, a bunch of Wizard of Oz centric podcasts, and we got a huge number of buyers from that. So if you can find things that sort of relate to it, I mean, who says you have to necessarily do a comic book podcast? You could do a science fiction book and then try to get on a science fiction podcast. I kind of like going sideways a little bit and finding a new audience if I can.
That's another great piece of advice right there.
I like to think of it, I don't know if you guys know this, but Costco can like parse data down to like, if you drink red wine, you're more likely to buy a book by Prince Harry kind of thing. They can like really distill it. So maybe it's the buyer in me, but I love finding like connections where somebody who likes knitting would like a book about and try to find those.
I have one. You've pretty much covered a lot of the questions I had listed for you.
Yeah, we did.
So I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to open up to the audience.
Sure.
Okay. So when you got the Eisner, that's when you got, well, actually, no, the Return of Dapper Man, was a personal connection that got you that publisher.
Yeah.
Then the Marvel and DC came calling when you won the Eisner. Since then, how do you get publishers to publish your work?
I got really lucky. So I'm not the best person to ask this question of. I got an agent really quickly and she's great. I let her do all that dirty work of pitching publishers for the most part. I do occasionally have other ideas and a lot of it, example, I was pitching a tarot deck to a publisher, which is a little outside of what my agent normally does. So I was just kind of talking to someone, and it again tends to be a personal connection. So one of the additional reasons that we never really talk about that we like to go to conventions is the networking time that we spend at BarCon or just whatever, where you're hanging out, you run into people, you talk to them on the floor, and you reinforce networking connections so that when you have an idea for a card deck and you've never done a card deck, you can go, oh, I know Justin's now working for a company that does card decks. Let me touch base with him and see if he'll, or he knows somebody that's looking. And my first Marvel work was sending the geekiest possible email to an editor I met on the floor of San Diego. So I would just encourage everybody to keep cards and touch base with people that you've connected with occasionally, whether it's grabbing a drink when you go to a convention or, just send a card, send a postcard, anything, just kind of keep on top of their radar if you can.
I had mentioned this before on this group that I do these interviews because I suck at BarCon. I don't drink.
It's rough, isn't it?
So it's noisy. Everybody, is half wasted. So
yes, and if you're not careful, you're going to sit and talk with the people you already know instead of trying to meet at least
right.
one.
So I do these interviews so that it's a different way to get to know people in the industry.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, BarCon's tough. Networking is tough. I'm married to an introvert who works in the gaming industry, so I'm talking to him all the time about networking too. But
by the way, guys, BarCon is when everybody goes to the bar after a Comic-Con.
Yep. It sounds fancier than it is. It's just
it's not this one event that we all know about. That's a secret handshake thing. It's just that everybody goes to the bar at the hotel after the Comic-Con.
And there's usually one that you've picked out for each convention that everybody knows to go to.
And everybody just networks there. So,
Yeah.
So now I'd like to open it up to the audience. We have quite a few people here. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Janet? Just go ahead and unmute yourself, John.
Okay. I just wanted to get your opinion. I know the web is changed everything when it comes to publishing and getting your art out there, for good and bad. But do you have an opinion or observation on like graphic novels that are published on a website? Somebody will do it on their website and do like a chapter a week or a month, and then when they're all done, they publish the whole thing as a book and then try and sell that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even necessarily publish it themselves as a book. The publisher will sometimes just buy it on the power of webcomics. I think it's a great tool if you if you're inclined to doing it. There's a specific pace to it that I think you have to get used to, and I think you have to be very, very regular about it. But I'm doing a presentation for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. That's a big thing. They wanted to talk about some different revenue sources, and webcomics for me was one of the ones I was going to talk about. And you know, looking through, you've got plenty of examples like Laura Olympus, the Emily Carroll books. A friend of mine just had D&D doggos, or DN doggos, that she does get picked up. Her dogs play D&D. It's great. And you know, and I have a friend named Lily who does a bunch of like animal behavior books, and those got picked up. So it is definitely a viable thing to do. I don't think that you should go into web publishing or web comics specifically. I think you should do it for the joy of doing it itself. And if it gets picked up by a publisher, that's great. But you do have a body of work that's easily repackaged and sold to a publisher, which, you know, is one of the big battles. A lot of times they don't want to talk to new author illustrators unless they actually have work ready, because they don't know for sure that you're going to be able to finish it. So in that, at least you have an advantage for things, and a lot of stuff that people can look at and see how your sequential work goes, which is no small thing either, honestly. So
John,
I'm a fan.
I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
A year or so ago, I did a survey of all these, the most successful comics on Kickstarter, and a large percentage of them were, and we're talking about Kickstarters that were funded in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? And most of them were compilations of webcomics. And I think the reason for that is because these guys had been publishing a webcomic for 4 or 5 years, and they already built up a fan base.
Agreed.
So when they do their Kickstarter, they already have, if you do a Kickstarter book and for a first-time book, nobody knows about it, right? But if you have a webcomic that's been around for 4 or 5 years, and it's good, and you have a fan base, when you do your Kickstarter, there's all these people who are ready to buy it. And a lot of these guys, you know, they'll get picked up by a publisher because they already have a following. So
yeah, and that's a big deal. I mean, talking about internet and social things, because you're going to have to do a lot of your own marketing. It's good to have it's good to have it's good to have followers online so that you have someone to talk to anyways. So valuable.
okay, next question, guys.
Thank you.
Anybody? No questions? Jade. No.
I might as well ask one.
Go ahead, Tyler.
So I'm just curious. I mean, yes, I'm not really begging to know, but there's this. So say you like self-publish a book and you wanna have it traditionally published. Like, what's the likelihood of that happening, and what would be the process behind that?
That's a good question. And it's got kind of an odd answer that's going to sound really counterintuitive. One great limitation to self-publishing and then selling the work to a traditional publisher is that you don't want to have been too successful in the self-publishing. And I know that sounds terrible, but if you come up to a publisher and you say, I sold 20,000 copies of this book myself, they might very well say, you found your market. Congratulations. We can't do anything else for you. They may or may not be true. There are stories of people that self-published and ended up with a contract. My favorite one is from a billion years ago. There was it's not comics, but there was a guy in Atlanta who started writing, it was erotica, but it was, I think it was specifically Black erotica. It was not happening very much at that time. And he would go sell it. Like it was, I think it was Black gay erotica. He would sell it he would get out of his truck and sell it through like salons or bars or whatever. He would just go and he would sell it. And he sold tens of thousands of copies of these books. And eventually a publisher picked it up and thought they could do more with it. He's the only one I've ever heard of that happening with. Usually, and it was because nobody was publishing it at all. No one thought that there was a market for Black gay erotica. Clearly there is. So they were like, yeah, let's do this. So he ended up getting a really sweet multi-book publishing deal because of that. But by and large, if you come to a publisher and you're like, I sold tens of thousands of copies of this book, they will not want to take it. So that's something to keep in mind. The process for it, I mean, you basically want to get your book into the hands of an editor, or an agent to give to an editor. It's pretty much the same as with a manuscript, except you have something complete to show. And that's not to be sneezed at. It's generally a very good thing to make the purchasing person think as little as possible. They can see it. They don't have to extrapolate. They don't have to imagine. It's just right there, which can make something very much more saleable. So that's good. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but I would, if I were self-publishing and then wanted to take it to a publisher, I might do something like get a table at someplace like New York, where editors come around all the time. I get New York editors all the time at my table. And if you have your book out on your table, they're going to pick it up to look at. That's probably your easiest, most straightforward way to do it. The alternative to that is to start pitching it to agents or to publishers that say they have open submissions. And I would just send the whole book in for them to review.
Okay. I have another question.
Yeah.
So I'm working on a webcomic strip right now for kids, and I'm like going to post it to the internet, my social media, my website in September. But I also am looking for a website that I can that I can post it on for that, where kids are reading comics specifically, like the first thing that came to my mind was Webtoon, but I found out here in this workshop that it's probably not a good idea because kids aren't really advised to go on Webtoon. So I don't know if you know where kids are reading comics on the internet right now, if there's a website in particular at all.
Yeah, this is the eternal question. The problem with web comics and ebooks, honestly, is what format you're going to read in, because I don't think we ever coalesced around just one. I think it's mainly Comixology and Webtoons as the major ones. But my friend who does DN Doggos just did her own website and put them up, and then started, just started blasting it everywhere. You don't have the built-in discoverability of something like a Webtoons, but it can still work for you if you want to just, if you want to just pitch it and really sort of promote things. Sorry, I'm noticing we actually have chats. Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't see that till now. Okay.
Ask my kids where they read their webcomics.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's another thing to do is to ask. You might also, I mean, I know libraries have like they have like an audiobook service that's just for libraries. Maybe they have a preferred webcomics reading format too. You might check with your local librarians and
You
see.
can also check Comics Plus,
Yeah,
which is a digital, I think, distributor for libraries.
yes.
To that effect, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Gosh, Tyler brought up something that that I wanted to ask, but I can't remember and I didn't write it down. So next question, please.
Thoughts on, say, comic book size, say, the classic American graphic novel size versus the Japanese manga size, as well as page count.
Page count is going to dictate the price of the book, depending on if you decide to do color interiors, it's going to dictate the price of the book pretty hard. So, for example, the book I'm working on right now is middle grade, so it's full color. Weird sidebar in the trade book publishing, the mainstream book publishing market. They tend to think of adult comics as being black and white only, or like maybe 3-color with spot coloring, but they don't think of it as full color, as opposed to the comics industry where full color is 100% for adults all the time. So you just need to think about that. So page count tends to be dictated by two things: what the overall price point of the book's going to be after you get your printing cost out of it, and the number of signatures in a book. And if you're doing print on demand, your signature, which is does everybody know what signatures are? Okay. So a signature is the multiple of pages tend to be grouped in multiples. For print on demand, it's going to be a 4-page is your signature. So everything, your final page count has to be a multiple of 4. For offset press, it's a signature of 16, so it has to be a multiple of 16. That's why most children's picture books tend to be like 32 pages, because that's 2 16-page signatures. So you need to pay attention.
Basically, the paper folded, right?
Yeah, that's 4. And
This
then
is
if
a
you
four-
do
four
4 of
signature.
those, that's 16. Yeah,
And then you do this 16.
that's exactly right. So your page count is going to be dictated by those two things. And if I were determining how many pages I could go to and we're self-publishing, I would go and find a book that is similar in length and has the same attributes like color, hardcover versus paperback, whatever, to what I want to produce, and see what the MSRP is on the book in the store, because that's your competition. that's what your customer's expecting it to be, and then figure out how many pages you can get to see, because full color interior can be really pricey.
And I think, as Janet said earlier, whatever the format is, make sure it has a spine.
It has a spine.
Because
Gotta have a spine.
I just learned today, she mentioned that librarians prefer to have a spine.
They've got to have it for putting, like, the little bars and things
Right,
that tell where
right.
it is, so you can
But
see it.
also, if it doesn't have a spine and your book gets stuck in the bookstore sideways, nobody's gonna ever see it without a spine.
Yeah, I mean, libraries do often have groups for what they call zine groupings, which is specifically for saddle stitched type things. But if you want to be on the shelves, then you're going to need a spine. Yeah,
Right.
But most print on demand have spines too. So
But also the thing I meant
size.
by size with the American graphic novel versus Japanese graphic novel,
Right.
in that they're like the Japanese manga is printed usually in the size of those old Archie
Yep.
booklet sizes.
Yes, they are. And in fact, I learned recently that there is like a middle grade fiction size that's based on Raina Telgemeier's Smile. It's like the standard for middle grade fiction, one of them for book publishers. So
I'll have to look that up.
yeah, I know, right? It's like a slightly strange size, but shelves are now built for it. So I don't think it necessarily matters. I don't think that if you did a manga style book, you were wanting to appeal to a manga market and had it in a US comic size, that it would necessarily make them not want to buy it. But
Well, it definitely will change how much detail you can put in there.
yeah, and it's probably not going to be shelved near it, which is a weird other thing to think about. But you know, so that bookstores can put more books out there, they're gonna maximize space by having shelves be exactly the right size for the books wherever possible. So if you want to be close to manga and you're planning to sell to the manga market, it's worth thinking about making your book manga sized.
Thanks, Michael. You know, this question that Charles asked, I forgot to bring it up. It's in the chat.
Ah.
I don't understand it actually, because I'm not familiar with the reference, but do you see a market for creating comic books for the virtual reality market, like for an app like SphereTune VR? And I don't know what that is. There's a link
There's a
here.
link to it. I actually have a friend who was doing some work in VR comics for a while, and I don't know if it's just ahead of its time right now, but I don't hear a lot of buzz about it. So it might be that it's too early and it's eventually going to be, but like a lot of the other digital platforms, until people start coalescing around one or two possible options for finding it, it's hard to get a lot of sales through a particular, especially a platform that requires extra hardware to be able to use it. So, you know, if you had to go buy VR equipment for it, that's going to limit your market a little bit more.
Any other questions?
Do you guys want to hear anything about like how what happens when you sell a book to a buyer in a buying environment? I get
Yes,
that question a lot.
sure. We'd love to hear it.
All right, so it's something that's helpful too for you guys. So when you're pitching your book, you're going to need to come up with stuff called comp titles, comparison titles, and those don't necessarily have to be they don't necessarily have to be a book that is exactly like yours, but they need to be a book that will appeal to the same market and that has probably a comparable amount of market reach. So for example, if I had a brand new middle grade fantasy prose novel, I would not go into my buyer and sell it's just like Harry Potter. Would not go and say that, because it's not just like Harry Potter. Harry Potter was a phenomenon. I might hope that it sells like Harry Potter, but chances are no. I'm more likely, and plus Harry Potter came out a long time ago. So what publishers do is they come up with a list of 3 or 4 books that they think that your book is going to sell like, and they will go into a buyer. They get an appointment to sell their list for that month to the buyer, and then we'll go in and talk the buyer into hopefully buying more books to stock. Once the buyer has bought the books, the buyer has to you have like 8 weeks to sell through the inventory after it comes in, or the buyer starts doing returns, which is also normal for the book market and something to think about when self-publishing or publishing, period. Because it's not super fun getting your returns back, but it's a thing.
You mentioned earlier that you have an agent. Are they being your agent as an illustrator or as a writer or as both?
She has been my illustrator as an illustrator. She has been my agent as an illustrator. I'm sorry. I got back from vacation 2 days ago, so
There you go.
still not totally here. So she has done that for me before, but the way we structured it was I would come to her and say, hi, this is my friend Amy Chu. She's written this great book. She's done this great treatment of this book that we both really want to do. Would you pitch it for both of us? And she would do that for it. She is more used to dealing with writer illustrators so that you just sell the whole thing. But I mean, she's come to me before with things like DC's doing a line of middle grade graphic novels based on their characters. So would you like to try out for those? So she will come to me with jobs too sometimes and pitch me just as illustrator.
Have you worked with Amy Chu?
I have. She did my last two. She did my 2 Wizard of Oz adjacent books. Sea Sirens and Sky Island, the last
She's
2.
great. She's actually Amy and I go back years. We used to work at a magazine back in the 90s.
Oh,
And when I saw that she shifted to comic books, I asked her, "Hey Amy, let me take you out to lunch. I'd like to pick your brain." And
she's another good one to pick brains. I mean, where
Yeah,
else do you get like the Harvard Business School graduate who now makes comics?
she's actually been on a few of my panels, though she hasn't
Mhm.
actually been on a solo interview like this.
She-
Maybe she always had a hard time getting to the city from New Jersey, but maybe now we can do it. So we'll see.
Yeah, she's great though. But she's also, I would point out, if you're not good at networking, find a friend like Amy Chu who's great at networking, and she will introduce you to everyone.
And she has done that for me.
Yes.
So any more questions, guys? Because we're at that 1 hour mark, and as much as I love talking to you, I don't
Yeah.
want to take up more
Go
of your
for it.
time.
Yeah.
Any more questions, guys? No question? Okay. So let me see. I think I have one more question in my back pocket here. Let me just pull up my document
Great.
again. Well, here's something that I usually ask job interviewees. But I'll ask you, what would be your dream situation?
Ugh. My dream situation.
Yeah, from work-wise.
Work-wise, my
You have it
dream-
now.
Yeah, well, no, I wish I did, but my absolute dream would be to pitch a iconic enough book or series of books that that catch on like hotcakes, and I am able at that point to get advances for books ahead of time and work on them, sufficient that I can work on them over a year without any other commitments, and then have a book come out. That would be my absolute dream.
So have something so successful that you could just write your own ticket anytime.
Pretty much. I mean, that's my dream. Isn't that everyone's dream?
I think so. John's getting excited. So
It's everyone's dream.
it is everybody's dream. So
It's
anyway,
basically what George R. R. Martin has.
Exactly. Or Neil Gaiman. I would like to be Neil
Yeah.
Gaiman. That would be great.
or even Raina Tagelmeyer or
Yes,
Type
100%.
Yeah, so anyways, I'd like to thank you for coming out. If everybody could just give her a nice round of applause. And Janet, I do hope to see you, I'll meet you in person sometime.
If
Are you
you're
coming
going to be
to
in
New
New
York
York, I'll be
Comic-Con?
in New York for New York Comic Con.
Today was the deadline to submit panel
It was.
proposals. And I
That's right.
completely blanked
Me
on it.
too. I meant to do that too. Oh, well.
I've been building shelves all day long. I just built this shelf right here.
Oh, looks
Oh.
fantastic.
And I completely forgot. I had it on my list for today. So I think I'll just have to attend as a regular, unless I get on a panel somewhere.
I would say just post that you want to be on a panel and see if someone has something for you.
Yeah, we'll see. Wish me luck on that.
I
But
do.
but thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for
and-
having me.
I really love your comments on my feed, and I'm so glad you came on. This has been very, very informative, and you're a great guest.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for being patient with my didacticness when I get
Oh,
into
no, the more information, the better. I think everybody comes on here, and the more people, the longer guest talks, and the more information they give out, everybody I think enjoys it.
good.
So we
I'm
don't wanna-
I'm
we
happy
don't
to
wanna
help
rush
and I love
anybody, right?
talking about it. So, if happy to help at any time.
Could I say something? Yeah, if you wanted to reach out to you online, what kind what social media do you have?
All right, so I have not been using Twitter lately because it's but I'm currently mostly Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, just because I haven't done anything. The link, there's a link to everything though on my website. So probably easiest to just say go to j-k-lee.com and you can link to all my socials there and find what you like. And although I don't have my Blue Sky up yet, I'll get that up. So otherwise.
Okay.
Thanks for asking them.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Janet.
Thank you.
And I'll let everybody know when the recording is up and available. And one last question. Where did you go for vacation?
Oh, this is so bizarre. So we were part of a live chess game acting troupe for Ren Fairs a million years ago, and we're still friends with a bunch of the people. So we all get together once a year and rent a house. This year we went to Newport, Oregon, and just sort of hung out on the beach for a week. So it was great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, thanks for coming out. Next, we're having a in-person social on the 24th of this month. And then in September, we're having Adam Beecham, who is a comic book writer, but also a writer for TV animation. I met him years ago, I think at Long Beach Expo. So, and he was one of the few, he wrote a nice blurb for my book back then. So finally got to get him to come on the workshop. So again, thank you very much, Janet. And we will see you around. Everybody enjoy. And one last thing. I finally get to teach my dream class at FIT this October. It's a making comics class, everything from writing, layout, production, marketing. Okay, so if it's on my Facebook, and I think I sent an email out. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Bye.